The wind howled across the Montana plains like a wounded beast, dragging ribbons of icy snow through the air and slamming them hard against the quiet frontier town of Alder Bend. No one sensible was outside. Doors were bolted, shutters secured, fires stoked high. Even the saloon kept its lamps dim, the piano silenced, the usual noise swallowed by the blizzard's roar. But despite the storm, despite the kind of cold that froze a man's eyelashes shut if he blinked too slow, a lone cowboy pushed his way down the street, each step crunching through the thickening snow. His name was Colton Hayes, a rancher known for minding his business, keeping his hat low and his troubles lower. But tonight something tugged at him, an uneasy feeling crawling up his spine, a whisper inside the storm that wasn't quite wind. He paused mid-step, tilting his head. Through the swirling white faint shapes moved. At first he thought it was just shadows cast by lanterns, but then he saw a little arm, then another, and then the smallest tremble of a child's, sob cutting through the storm's growl. Colton's breath caught as the figures grew clearer. 6 children, thin, frostbitten, clothes soaked and patched, hair crusted with snow, faces pale as ghosts, trudged through the blizzard, like lost chicks pushed out of the nest too soon. The oldest boy, maybe 10 years old, tried to hold his siblings together, pulling them close as the wind shoved them sideways. The youngest, a tiny toddler barely able to walk, sobbed so hard his whole body shook. Colton stepped forward instantly, instinct overruling thought, his boots sinking in the icy slush as he approached them. Hey now," he called out, trying to keep his voice steady so he didn't scare them. The children froze like deer, wide-eyed and trembling. Fear and exhaustion painted across their faces. Snow clung to their lashes. Their lips were blue. And then he saw her. Behind them, stumbling, barely standing, a woman, gaunt, exhausted, wearing a threadbare dress that did nothing to shield her from the cruel winter. Her arms trembled violently as she tried to keep herself upright. She held a bundle close, maybe blankets, maybe food, maybe just hope, before her knees buckled. Colton lunged forward, but he was too far. The woman dropped to the frozen ground, collapsing face first into the snow with a weak, broken gasp. The children screamed, "Mama!" in unison, their cries slicing through Colton's chest like a hot knife. He reached her first, dropping to his knees, brushing snow from her face. Her skin was ice-cold to the touch, and her eyes fluttered, struggling to focus. She whispered something, the words too soft to catch, before her head lolled to the side. The storm swallowed the last of her strength. Colton's jaw tightened. He'd seen tragedy, he'd seen hardship, but something about this mother, pushing herself until she simply couldn't anymore, set. A fire blazing through him. "It's all right," he murmured, though nothing about the situation was all right. "I've got you. I've got all of you." The oldest boy sniffed, tears freezing on his cheeks. She didn't want to stop walking," he said through chattering teeth. "She said the town had food. She said we'd make it. But she ain't waking up." The children huddled around their mother, tiny bodies shivering violently. Colton shrugged off his coat, heavy, warm, lined with wool, and wrapped it around the unconscious woman. The cold bit instantly into his arms, but he didn't care. He pulled off his gloves and placed his bare hands on her cheeks to warm them. "Listen to me," he said gently, looking at the children. "We need to get her someplace warm. My ranch is just 2 miles out. I've got a wagon, blankets, a fire big enough to chase this storm right back to hell." The children looked uncertain, frightened of being alone, but more frightened of trusting a stranger. Their wide eyes flicked between him and their mother. The toddler sobbed harder, reaching for the woman's limp hand. Colton swallowed, his heart twisting. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said softly. "But if we leave her here one more minute in this cold, she won't—" He didn't finish. He didn't have to. The oldest boy nodded shakily, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. "Oh, okay, but please save her," Colton nodded, sliding his arms under the woman and lifting her carefully. She weighed almost nothing, too little for someone her age. Hunger had taken a toll long before the cold did. As he stood, he glanced around. Townsfolk peeked from behind curtained windows. From doorways, from the shadows, eyes filled with judgment. suspicion or plain indifference. Nobody moved to help. Nobody stepped forward. It made Colton's blood boil. He faced the children. "Stay close. Stay right behind me. Don't fall." They nodded and clung to each other, trudging through the snow as Colton carried their mother toward the stables, where his horse and wagon were sheltered. The blizzard thickened, Blake's whipping so fierce it stung his eyes, but he kept moving. Each breath burned. Each step felt heavier. He could feel the woman's faint pulse weakening against his arm. When they finally reached the stable, the warmth inside felt like a miracle. He laid her on a pile of hay, covering her with every blanket he could find, while the children huddled near the small stove, rubbing their hands together. "What's your name?" he asked the oldest boy while harnessing his horse. "Liam," the boy replied. "This is Nora, Jacob, Ellie, June, and baby Roscoe." Colton's gut clenched. 6 young children, out in a blizzard, with a mother who looked like she'd been fighting the world alone for far too long. "Liam," he said firmly, "we're going to get all of you home safe. I promise." Liam tried to smile but broke into tears instead. Colton placed a hand on his shoulder, steady and warm. "You're brave, kid. Your mama's lucky to have you." He loaded the children onto the wagon, wrapping them in blankets, then carefully lifted their mother onto a softer bed of hay at the back. As the wagon rolled out into the blizzard, the storm roared even louder, almost as if it wanted to chase them down. The wheels groaned under the snow. The wind clawed like icy fingers. But Colton held the reins tight, jaw set, eyes fixed forward. He would get them home. He would get them safe. No storm, no cold, no cruel hand of fate was going to take them tonight. Not if he had anything to say about it. And somewhere deep in the swirling darkness, he felt it again, that whisper he'd heard earlier. Only now he understood. It wasn't the storm calling. It was destiny. And it had just placed 6 shivering children and 1 dying mother directly into his arms. For a man who never went looking for trouble, Colton Hayes suddenly knew he had found something else entirely: purpose. And as his wagon pushed through the unforgiving blizzard, he made a silent vow that no matter what it cost him, he would not let this family fall apart. Not tonight. Not ever. The blizzard raged, with even greater fury as Colton urged the wagon toward his ranch, the wind slapping against his face so hard his eyes watered. But he refused to slow down, not when 7 lives depended on him. The children huddled beneath blankets behind him, their tiny bodies trembling less now that they had warmth, though fear still lingered in their eyes as they watched their mothers' chest rise and fall in shallow, uneven breaths. Every minute felt like a battle between hope and despair. But Colton kept whispering encouragement to the horse, to the children, to the unconscious woman, to himself, anything to drown out the storm's merciless roar. When they finally reached the ranch, Colton jumped from the wagon before it even stopped, scooping the woman into his arms and carrying her inside the house, where a roaring fire burned bright. "Warm up by the hearth," he instructed the children gently, and they obeyed, shivering as they peeled off soaked socks and held their hands toward the flames. Colton laid their mother on his own bed, piling blankets over her, then ran to heat water, brew a strong medicinal tea, and fetch clean cloths. His mind raced. He wasn't a doctor, but out here on the frontier, a man learned to patch wounds, treat fevers, and fight death with whatever tools life gave him. When he touched her forehead, he felt the coldness sinking deep beneath the skin, hypothermia, exhaustion, starvation. She needed warmth and nourishment fast. Slowly, he lifted her head and coaxed a few drops of warm broth to her lips, praying she would swallow. For a moment, nothing happened until finally her throat moved, faint but real. He sighed with relief. Liam stepped into the doorway, wringing his hands. Is she gonna die?" he whispered, eyes wide and wet. Colton turned, placing both hands on the boy's shoulders. "Not if I have anything to say about it," he promised. "Your mama's a fighter. She made it this far in that storm. That tells me she's stronger than most folks I know." Liam nodded, though fear lingered. "We ain't got nowhere else to go," he whispered. "Papa died last year, and the man who took us in, he turned mean. Mama ran us out after he raised his hand at Jacob. We been walking for days." Colton's chest tightened with anger and pity. "You're safe now," he said firmly.
All of you.
"No one's raising a hand at anybody under my roof." Over the next hours, Colton worked tirelessly, warming the woman's hands between his own, changing her cold, dampened clothes for dry ones, feeding her broth little by little. The children fell asleep by the fire, curled like puppies on the rug, their soft breaths mixing with the crackling of logs. Outside, the storm thundered on, but inside the cabin, warmth and life pushed back against the cold. Just before dawn, the woman stirred. Her eyelids fluttered and her lips parted slightly. Colton leaned closer. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" She blinked slowly, her lashes crusted with frost. Her voice, barely present, whispered, "My children." Before he could answer, Liam rushed to her side, dropping to his knees. Mama, we're safe!" "Mr. Hayes saved us." Her weak eyes moved toward her son, and a tear rolled down her cheek. "Thank God," she breathed. I thought I lost you." Colton stepped back, giving them space. The children, roused by their mother's voice, ran to her, climbing into the bed, hugging her carefully with little hands. The room filled with sniffles, soft cries, and the kind of fragile relief that only comes after surviving something that should have destroyed you. Hours passed and color gradually returned to her cheeks. She drank more broth, then tea, then finally managed a small smile when baby Roscoe crawled onto her chest and babbled nonsense at her. When she was strong enough to sit upright with pillows behind her, she looked at Colton with gratitude so deep it struck him speechless. "I owe you more than I can ever repay," she whispered. "My name is Merrin Dalton, and you saved my life." Colton tipped his hat shyly. "Just did what any man ought to do," he said. Though they both knew most townsfolk had watched her collapse and done nothing. Days passed, and the storm eventually faded, leaving the world coated in thick, sparkling snow. Inside the ranch, life bloomed with new warmth. The children laughed for the first time in months, chasing each other across the wooden floors and helping Colton tend to the animals once he opened the barn again. Merrin grew stronger each day, her face softening as the constant weight of fear lifted from her shoulders. Colton found himself drawn to her, not just because she was brave and gentle, but because she had endured so much without breaking. One evening, as the children slept, huddled together under quilts on the living room floor, Merrin stood beside Colton on the porch, staring at the quiet, star-covered sky. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. "You gave my children back their future." Colton swallowed hard, his breath fogging the cold night air. "You don't owe me anything." "Merrin, just glad I could help." She looked up at him, eyes shimmering with something tender. "Most men wouldn't have stopped. Most men wouldn't risk themselves in a storm like that." "Maybe," Colton admitted, "but I couldn't look away. Not from you. Not from those little ones." She blushed slightly, turning her face from him, but not before he saw the faint smile tugging at her lips. The days became weeks, and what started as rescue slowly became family. The children began calling Colton Mr. Cole. Then, eventually, Uncle Cole, and Merrin no longer slept in his bed because she was sick. She slept there because he offered it, and she shyly accepted. By the time spring thawed the snow into soft rivers running through the fields, Colton realized he had fallen for her deeply, quietly, without ever meaning to. One warm afternoon, while the children played outside with stick horses and makeshift lassos, Colton approached Merrin in the kitchen where she was kneading dough. His heart thudded like a horse on hard ground. "Merrin," he said, voice low, "you and the kids, you've brought something into this house I didn't know I was missing. And I'd be honored if you'd stay here." "For good." She froze, hands in the dough, eyes widening. "Colton." "Not out of obligation," he added quickly. "Not because you owe me, but because I care about you. All of you. And I'd like to build something. Real with you if you want that." Her eyes filled with tears, warm ones, not the cold ones born of fear. She stepped forward and placed her flour-dusted hand on his cheek. "Colton Hayes, you gave us safety, dignity, hope. The children adore you, and she exhaled shakily. "I think I've been falling for you since the night you carried me out of that blizzard." Relief washed through him like sunlight, breaking through clouds. He pulled her gently into his arms, holding her the way he had dreamed of, but never dared. Outside, the children cheered. They had been spying through the window, of course, and then burst inside, laughing and hugging both adults until they all toppled into a pile on the floor. In that moment, surrounded by warmth, love, and the promise of a new beginning, Colton finally understood why destiny had pushed him down that snowy road that night. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't chance. It was fate bringing a broken family to a man who had an empty home and a heart big enough to welcome them all. And as the family, yes, family, sat together that evening, sharing bread and stories and laughter, their future no longer looked cold or uncertain. It looked bright. It looked full. It looked like home. If you enjoyed this story and want more emotional Western tales like this, make sure to subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive and brings more heart-touching journeys to your screen.